Hi, I'm Kurt Doolittle for the Institute of Natural Law, or the Natural Law Institute. This is a response to Dr. Moeller's uh, post today on commodification of philosophy. I'm doing this off the top of my head without a script, um, partly because I don't have the time to really work something up like that. But anyway, for Dr. Mueller, I'm what you'd call an epistemologist, I guess, in your frame of reference. I would call it decidability, which is the via negativa of truth. So I specialize in decidability, and this works its way into law. Anyway, so um, what's your there's a couple of points you made about commodification, about um, about Kant a little bit, and I want to answer that because I'm trying to be a fan because I intuit something in your pieces that you publish that, but there's also something in the background of it I can't quite get my arms around that I'm not sure I like so much. In other words, not that's quite correct. It's bothering me in the back of my mind, and I can't put my arms around it. Anyway, as for commodification, this is a Marxist term, so it's pretty hard to translate that into sciencey prose. But uh, uh, you could mean that as dumbing down. You could mean that as diluting, diluting. Um, you could mean that as I think in diluting is probably the best way, as inserting error. In other words, so there's a difference between inserting error, dumbing things down, and etc. So it's because if you do that, you dilute things and you dumb things down enough, they lead to misunderstandings. Now, I'm sympathetic because, of course, we see all sorts of nonsense make it online by people who overreach. Um, and so I can agree with that. I mean, that makes perfect sense. If I wanted to beat up philosophy tube, I could do it all day long, but I have better things to do. If I wanted to beat up economists, influential economists, I could beat them up all day long. I have nothing better to, but I have better things to do, and so I deal with beating up legal theory because it's the best thing I can do. In any event. But the claim that there's some quality differential between the university and the public presentation, I'm not sure flies. In my work, I review law school, economic, and political science. Of course, some sociology, but that's mostly garbage anyway. But I review courses taught by these, the curricula, the books read, and whatever, and the presentations by the major universities. And I got to tell you, it's intellectually embarrassing. Some of this stuff is just pure propaganda, and much of it's missing the core tenets by which certain things like the natural common concurrent laws in our system of government is constructed. So, I mean, the first principles aren't even being taught. If I were to talk about law, it's no longer being taught as here's how we assist in administration of the state so that we can mature the polity into maximum responsibility and maximum quality of life. If you look at what's being taught in law in the not top law schools, it's basically constitutional undermining. I mean, I'm only exaggerating that slightly because I want to draw attention to the point. So if I don't get it down into political science, it's utter drivel, and it's embarrassing. It's as and if you get down in social science, it's more embarrassing. And of the behavioral sciences, only psychology, thanks to the separation of cognitive science, there was the people who defected from psychology into cognitive science fixed it. So I don't buy that that's the case. That you get a better education in or that the educational system says that you're a master of a discipline, and I'll get to that in a minute, that's actually producing anything. And the reason is siloing prevents adversarial competition between the different sciences. So if you don't actually know something about the four sciences, at least the basic principles of formal logics, the formal sciences, logics, um, which includes epistemology, as we would say it, the physical, behavioral, and evolutionary laws, then you are going to apply, you're going to advance the premises of your discipline's silo beyond their means of applicability, just like people on YouTube are trying to explain philosophy that's over their heads beyond their capacity. So, I mean, you can't even do I mean, I don't have a PhD because you can't do one in this many disciplines anywhere, and you certainly can't do one that takes 10 to 15 years, which is, I mean, empirically speaking, that's what it takes to be able to be able to master a field sufficiently and to find the holes in it and to fill them today, unless you're just lucky that you're in a generation where that's all been done by the two generations before. So that doesn't play out. I mean, in other words, the evidence doesn't argue that you're correct. The theory, the rationalization that you gave might, but the evidence doesn't play it out. Um, so what was the next piece? The piece of uh, uh, on how so the next piece is, well, let's look at what does happen. If I were to pick the best education available today in at least the social, economic, political, and geostrategic disciplines, that's all online. It's online, and it's done by people who have mastered the presentation and the material. And what's somewhat disturbing to me, more than somewhat disturbing, is interesting evidence to me is that the best people are actually producing it without going to university. And so if you look at the best synthetic historian, he's fucking 21 years old. The best guy I can find um, in finance is 23 years old. Um, the best guy you find in geostrategy, although he's somewhat limited, is an independent. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing, and I don't really, and I think that's the reason is because there's a tendency in your field or many fields to teach the field because that's what you master is the field, but it's not cross-disciplinary enough, and people don't have a general enough education in the foundations to be able to get around it. So I mean, I do this pretty regularly, and I'm struggling with this concept because, as far as I can tell, most they're all the professorial method, in other words, the discipline is like every other, and that there's just as in every science, that it really comes down to a handful, five, three, 12, that produce almost all the value, and everybody else is a day laborer. Now they find that incredibly offensive, and it's not that day laborers don't work at building the bricks of a foundation that to accumulate in an edifice over time. But if you look at the people who add value, which is synthesis, which is integration of discovery of a novelty and integration into our broader understanding of the world, so that our complete understanding of the world, this is important. Our complete understanding of the world is consistent, coherent, consistent of identities. It's consistent and coherent across all the dimensions testable by man. Well, that's actually uh, that's happening. So I don't really, and so synthesis is what gets you. I mean, I can pull up most disciplines, Robert Reich and David Robert. I can pull up most disciplines off the top of my head. Furthermore, what's more frustrating in philosophy is that, the philosophical project, I mean, the analytic project was an attempt uh, just like the German method, which you're far from. You have the you. When I listen to you, I hear both continental German continental, and I hear Marx when I hear you talking, and then these things make sense. Of course, I'm an Anglo, right? And so I think I disambiguate disciplines, and I had to me it's religion, science, law, economics, etc. And this isn't a problem for me. Why? Because in the English model, these are consistent and coherent, despite the fact that every discipline is simply a grammar of different vocabulary describing the same consistent processes across all disciplines. Whereas in the German model, this is Kant and Hegel's responsibility. They're trying to conflate it in order to replace religion, which is admirable. And I still can't always figure out why German society is so exceptionally awesome at what it does. And I've said that it's the place I haven't lived yet. Maybe I need to spend a year there to see if I can disambiguate that. But anyway, my point is that it doesn't what you're saying, despite being a fan and appreciating the critiques you have or the criticisms you have that you bring about. I'm not sure uh, this one flies. And I realize that there is a problem if you specialize in Kant because Kant tried very hard to pull this together. But I mean, as someone who scienced Kant and converted him into scientific language, you discover he wasn't actually too far off. Um, so I mean, I can understand that the interest in him and his work. So I get that, but there is a universal, what we view in the Anglosphere, a universal problem in continental work, which is this hangover of trying to conflate experience with, basically conflate everything into a universal like in philosophy, just like the Middle East developed mythicism as a universal, whereas in the West, the rest of the West or the Anglosphere, we're analytical and we disambiguate the different fields, and that's because unlike the rest of Europe, we were an early legalistic society. In any event, so I hope that was somewhat useful. I think I made the points I wanted to. I'm probably rambling a little bit longer here because I've done this off the top of my head. I just want to pull up my notes on your piece real quickly, um, and yes, that's basically all I wanted to make. I mean, essentially, what happens in the model, the sciences, is we gradually, parsimoniously, or what Popper would call through verisimilitude, or I would call through market competition, or Darwinian evolution, we converge through competition between the disciplines on a single, consistent, coherent system of measurement across all disciplines, and which is what I do. But my problem with when I hear you talk about philosophers, and when other people talk about philosophers, that system of measurement doesn't exist. So when you talk about, let's say, Kant, you have to talk about it using his weights and measures, right? But then there's no way to contrast those weights and measures against a standard of weights and measures. And so, in order to teach any philosopher, you would have to do that. Except this, now we encounter the problem of philosophy is basically a secular religious substitute for, has been for the people who can't swallow religion. So, which is, of course, many of us. So when that happens, now you're not sort of, my attitude is if you don't know the sciences, then you can look at the philosophers and end up with the same thing by studying a philosopher on his system of weights and measures without commensurability by a universal system of weights and measures. So that you do the same thing by teaching philosophy that you're arguing that these people out there who make errors or generalizations or whatever do, because they're violating both standards. They're neither providing a universal standard of measure to put this thing against and describing it against the terms implied by the author, or they're ruining the author's, which is what I think you're arguing, ruining the author's system of weights and measures, and confusing the population more. So I'm not sure. I would have to say that while this is off the top of my head, so it's not that organized. I don't see what you see. I see the world gonna is very much headed toward where the best professors, and there's a small number of them, will produce the best content for very large amounts of money. And the problem for education then is ensuring the quality. In other words, is lesson planning for the students. In other words, managing the progress of the students rather than teaching the material. And I think that you might say, well, that would lead to a standard. I'm like, well, it might, but if I look at the quality of teaching across the spectrum, I think it would actually dramatically improve the teaching because we've gone the opposite direction to atomization and opinion, which is embarrassing. Anyway, I'm sorry for my sniffles. My allergies are bothering me. Anyway, thank you for your work. Thank you for producing this really interesting piece. It just was a great example. I could give you feedback. I'm Kurt Doolittle for the Natural Law Institute, which is basically formal logical law. Thanks.